to get out. And the past 3 days, we've eaten out actually indoors in restaurants. And all the waiters, waitresses, cooks, everybody was wearing a mask. And we did not wear a mask while eating, but we wore a mask when we walked out. But it was nice for the first time in 3 months to eat out.
Yeah, it was great.
And I feel like I don't even like eating out that much. So I feel like I've gotten like too full. Like the food is all rich. Like I like eating in. But it was nice for once to have a change of habit.
Yeah.
And to have, to just sit down and enjoy, and someone, people don't realize how great it is to eat out. Like, you go someplace, someone just cooks for you, someone else serves you the food, and it's all nicely decorated on the plate. And then when you're done, somebody comes, and now they're wearing masks. So it's like they're in costume, like you can't even see their face. And so they take their food and they wash the plates, presumably, or throw them out. We don't even know. And then we give them a little metal card and they take it and then they give it back to us and we're done. And we could just walk out and go home.
Yeah.
So I missed I had missed the benefits of eating out. But I think after 3 nights in a row, I'm not going to do it tonight, because tonight I am playing in a charity poker tournament on PokerStars. It's called Poker for Life. Go to poker and then the number 4 life.org if you also want to play. But I'm looking forward to that. It's the second charity poker tournament I've done in the past few weeks. Do they have bubble tea in Florida though? Jay, good question. Bubble tea is good for a 24-year-old like you, or I don't even. Have you turned 30 yet? I don't know.
32 or something.
You're 32, Jay?
Or 3.
No.
Yes. You always say that.
Well, in any case, I haven't been able to drink bubble tea since I was about 31 or 32 years old. Because what bubble tea is, it's this big sugary tea drink that then has these tapioca balls in it.
I love it.
And it's served in Chinatown and in other Chinatowns around the world, presumably. And it is so filling and so rich that if I drink it once, I gain, like one small cup, I will gain 15 pounds and feel horrible for the next week. Wait, Jay's 32 or 33, he's not sure. I understand, he's not that good at math. So, which is a completely racist thing to say, but we could address that. But I want to talk about some things to think about in terms of new business models. Like normally the world doesn't change month by month or even year by year. Like yes, when the smartphone developed and when the iPad developed, there was new opportunities for business models like Uber, for instance, or the Uber of X, the Uber of nannies, the delivering food. So these were all great things with smartphones. But now it's not some new technology that's changing the way we think about entrepreneurship. It's this lockdown and the stress we have all felt dealing with this lockdown. And then what we haven't yet experienced yet is the post-traumatic stress of this lockdown. We have not yet gone post. We're still in the stress of the lockdown. Yeah. So somebody, OGMALC, is saying, bruh, your wife is hot, WTF. Yeah, WTF. Believe me, as people know who have been listening to this, within 6 weeks of our first date, I had to ask her to marry me. We were in Panama at the time. And then 2 weeks after that, on December 31st, our first date was October 30th, 2018. And we had met before then, but this was our first date, the first time I kissed her, because I always kiss on the first date. And then we're married December 31st, 8 a.m., December 31st, 2018. We've been married now a year and a half. We're almost at our 1.5 year anniversary, which by the way, we didn't even celebrate our first year anniversary. She blames me for that, but it's probably true. I should water this plant, as they would say, more gracefully. I should have been more aggressively, celebrating our first year anniversary. But I was busy doing IG lives and podcasts and finishing a book and so on. So yeah, someone says, and this is the important thing about luck. I am lucky James is lucky, and she always balances out. She says she's lucky too.
Yes,
She is
I am.
not very lucky.
Yes, I'm very lucky.
If she were to go to a casino, she should not bet on anything because your luck has run out. Whereas I'm definitely lucky. Like I should go into a casino and put it on 00 all the time at the roulette wheel because I'm lucky. Like I always tell people I'm extremely lucky, and sometimes people say, "Oh, don't say that because then you'll jinx it." No, if you're truly lucky, you should say it all the time. There's no way for me to jinx it. I am lucky. She's an example of my luck.
Thank you.
She is horribly unlucky, whether she realizes it or not, but time will tell. So someone's asking a basic question, and I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship after this. The secret to getting a hot woman. So when I was, and by the way, not that I know the secret, the real secret to getting a hot woman is to be incredibly good looking, like Brad Pitt. But Brad Pitt doesn't know the answer to this question, whereas I do know. Like I would not ask Brad Pitt for dating advice because Brad Pitt doesn't need any dating advice. I would not ask Leonardo DiCaprio for dating advice because Leonardo DiCaprio, he doesn't even realize where he might be lacking in dating. He is too, it's like when I was talking to Tony Hawk. So Tony Hawk has been, he won the world championship of skateboarding 11 years in a row. And I asked him, more or less, not in one question, but I asked him more or less, what's the secrets? Like, how did you get so good? He can't answer because he's been skateboarding since he's like 4 years old. So it's so built into his biology that it's hard for him to understand. It's like when we talked to Garry Kasparov. Oh, why were you so good at chess? He can't understand it because he doesn't even understand the question because since he was 4 years old, he was good at chess. And it's not that he didn't work at it. It's not that Tony Hawk doesn't work at it. Garry Kasparov probably has a harder work ethic than anybody on the planet. Same with Tony Hawk. But they don't really understand why they're so much better than everyone else. So I wouldn't ask Brad Pitt for dating tips because he can't help me. I would ask me. What I'm doing is I'm second level analyzing your question. You asked a good question because I would ask someone like me, how did you get such a hot wife? Because there is a trick to it. And I would know because I wouldn't have, look at me. I wouldn't, when I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, I had braces like train tracks with the rubber bands. I don't know how many people are so old that they remember the rubber bands. And then once a month I'd go to the dentist or the orthodontist and they would crank on some crank and tighten up the braces so that my teeth would be mushed together even more. And there was so much pain every month. It's just the worst. I would go home and I would cry, not only because of the pain, but because why did I have, like you open your mouth and it's just all just dirty gray metal in your mouth. Like the smile is the ugliest thing. And then not only that, I had huge acne. Like I'd have to go once a month. I would go into the city with my dad and I'd go to this dermatologist and she would take a drill and she would, did you have to do this when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Did you have like cysts and
No.
So I would take this drill, she would take this drill and just for like hours just be drilling at the cysts on my face in order to drain out the pus on the cysts on my face. Like you could see even here, there's like a little bit of like, that's the leftovers. And then I had these huge glasses. Like right now I have glasses, but I had glasses like double the size of this on my face. I don't know why they gave me the biggest glasses on the planet. And I couldn't touch my eyes, so I couldn't switch to contact lenses. I had this fear of touching my eyes. And my hair was all in tangles. It was like dreads. And I was I wasn't necessarily uncoordinated, but I wasn't athletic. So I was always the last person picked for athletic teams. And I don't know, I didn't really have that many friends, even though I was a nice kid. I grew up in the same place. I was a smart kid. And I was prematurely liking girls. Like from 4th grade on, I just was always in love with somebody and nobody would ever, what is it, requite? No one would ever return that love. And so I just didn't have any kind of girlfriend until well after high school. So I had to think about this question a lot. And the answer there's no one answer, but the answer is several things. One is being very direct without being threatening. So if you like someone, you tell them you like them. If you want to kiss somebody, you tell them you want to kiss them. If you want to ask somebody out, you just ask them out. You're never, believe me, the ugly kid is never going to be asked out. They have to do the asking. So if you like somebody, you're never going to get a chance to go out with them unless you ask them out. So before I learned this, I used to do all sorts of things like, I would plan to bump into them in the hallway at school. Like I would know what classes they were at. Like I was a stalker. So I would know they're coming out of math class at 2:35 p.m. Oh, hey, it's so weird bumping into you every single day. That's so weird. We have so much in common. Or like later on when I was in graduate school, I'd walk past someone's house right when I knew they would be walking out of their house. And so, let's walk into school together. So I was always like circling around the real issue, which is that I like them. So being direct and being honest is incredibly important. The other thing is, and this might have been more insecurity than anything, but being good at something is very important. So this is going to sound odd, but the very first time I ever asked a girl out, I was in 12th grade, and just the day before I had won the New Jersey Junior Chess Championship. So it was announced on the loudspeaker in the morning during the morning news announcements at school. So everybody knew I was like the state champion of chess. And so I was good at something and I proved it. And so it gave me enough confidence to ask someone out, which is the weirdest, nerdiest way to justify asking someone out. But I always tried to be really good at something. For a long time in the early 90s, I thought I had to have a published novel before I could ask someone out, because then, it was stupid. I always outsourced my self-esteem to outside events. Oh, am I a chess master? Okay, I have my self-esteem. Oh, did I publish a novel? Okay, that I have self-esteem, which by the way, I never did. So I never got self-esteem from that. And in chess, whenever I lost a game in an official tournament, I would be so depressed. Like my self-esteem would go down so much. I probably couldn't go to, I would cry. I would have nightmares. I was 18 years old, by the way. I would cry. I have nightmares. I wouldn't be able to go back to school for at least 3 days. Like let's say the tournament was on a Sunday. It was probably not until Wednesday or Thursday that I would be able to return to school, because so much of my self-worth was outsourced to these external events. And so you learn, so that was what I thought initially, that you have to be good at something. But then I realized you have to be really, and people always say, be yourself, which I usually think is like bad advice, because in different situations, you should act and behave differently. But deep down, you should be yourself. Like everybody says, love others as you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, what does that statement even mean? So it's really important.
I think it's like better just like respect others as you respect yourself.
But what if you don't respect yourself?
Well, then you have a problem.
Yes, so I would have a problem. I was always outsourcing my self-esteem to external events. So even my first few girlfriends, relationships, I was always outsourcing my self-esteem to the other person. So if she liked me, I would feel good about myself. If she didn't like me, I would feel bad about myself. And I would literally, and that would just cycle, right? I would beg, why don't you like me? Why are you angry at me? Like I would beg for her to like me again and convince her to like me again. And of course, that would disgust the other person. And so it would be this death cycle. I would set up somebody else or some other thing as my mirror. And that even happened when I lost all my money the first time. I had outsourced all my self-worth to my net worth. And so my self-esteem took a huge hit. Like I was suicidal. My self-esteem was so low. Not because I was broke, but because being broke made my self-esteem go to negative after it had been so high. And all of that was wrong. And again, I write about it and talk about it a million times, but the only thing that really helped me was every day not being like a physical jock, but at least eating well, sleeping well, moving well, getting rid of the toxic relationships in my life. Because if someone was toxic in my life, whether it was a friend or a relationship or a partner, I was always trying to toxicity is hard to define, but for me, it was usually, I was always trying to please them when they didn't seem to care as much about pleasing me. So that was a toxic relationship, or that was an example of a type of toxic relationship in my life. So I had to end all of those, and it was very hard. And then creatively, I had to be creative all the time. So that was where I started writing down 10 ideas a day. So I didn't just do this to make money. A lot of people think, oh, well, was it 10 business ideas every day? No, it might have been, 10, like yesterday I wrote down, or 2 days ago I wrote down 10 ways the world's hypocritical every day that I see. So, every day it's something new, but something mildly difficult to exercise that idea muscle. I know if I had a really strong idea muscle, then I could talk and be interesting to people. But I was just more or less, I was interested in things for their own benefit. I would have more curiosity. Like when I was writing idea lists every day, it got me more curious about everything in life. So even during this, these protests since George Floyd was murdered, I got really interested and curious. What does systemic racism mean? Because I've heard on both sides, and I've heard from both white people and black people, there is systemic racism, and I've also heard there isn't systemic racism. So I researched it, and I read books, and I talked to people, and I went back to the Constitution, and I looked at the history of the U.S., and I wrote for myself 10 examples of systemic either racism or classism that could be reformed. So being interested in things makes you curious about things, makes you write idea lists, and then it just makes you, and being a source of ideas makes you a magnet. And I'll explain that being the source of ideas is incredibly valuable, both for making millions of dollars and for attracting people to you. And
so you're an independent thinker.
Yeah, and I'll give an example, but I've talked about this before on these IG lives, but not recently. I call it the Google technique, and I describe it more thoroughly in my next book. I'm not trying to advertise it. That book's not coming out for another 8 or 9 months. But think about Google. If I am interested in motorcycles and I want to learn more about motorcycles, and I go to Google and say, tell me more about Google. Can you tell me more about motorcycles? Google is very honest. Google says, listen, James, we don't know anything about motorcycles, but we've done the work for you. Here are the 10 websites out of 600 billion. Here are the 10 websites that we here at Google feel are the best websites to tell you about motorcycles. And by the way, here are 3 more websites about motorcycles, but you should know that they're paying us for just being honest. And Google measures its success by how quickly you leave it. It doesn't try to engage you in conversation or sign up here so we tell you more about motorcycles. It just says, get the hell out of here. Go to this website about motorcycles. And they measure success in an algorithm. They change the algorithm constantly to improve it. They measure the success if people leave the google.com faster than the last algorithm change. And then if later on I might say, well, I need to know about racism. So where do I go? Do I go to a site about racism? Oh no, I remember that other site, Google, that was the source of all the ideas about motorcycles. Let me just check in with them to see what they say. So I go to Google, type in racism, and Google's like, whoa, that's a touchy subject, but we don't know anything about racism, but we're happy to help you. Here's the top 10 sites you might want to look at about racism. And then it'll send me away. And again, they measure success by the speed they send me away. So Google's the source of so much information and so many answers to our questions that just by doing that, they created a business model that is worth $1.5 trillion. So imagine if you do that on a personal level, so that if someone comes to you and says, hey, James, do you have any ideas about a business I can start? Or what do you think about this idea? Or what do you think about this book idea? I don't say, hey, let me work on that business with you so I can get a cut. Or I don't say, hey, that's my book idea, I'm going to write it first. I say, oh, here's all my ideas. See you later. If you need help, you're welcome to come back. So if you implement the Google technique in your own personal life, the next time someone needs ideas about, hey, I decided not to write that book, but I'm doing a business about, I want to set up my dental practice. How do I get patients for my dental practice? Oh, here's some ideas for you. I've thought about that already. Here's 10 ideas for you. And I just give my ideas for free. You again become the source, which is why when I share my ideas with Amazon, LinkedIn, Quora, Facebook, even Google, I've visited all of those places because they want to hear, oh, he had those 10 ideas. Does he have more ideas? When you reached out to me, you didn't know, I knew it was the first date. You didn't know it was the first date. Maybe you suspected a little, I don't know. But you wanted to ask me about stocks, specifically some stocks in your portfolio. You wanted to ask me, and you wanted to ask me about careers involving stocks and so on.
Because I knew you like for a year.
Yeah, and you knew I was freely giving information, and I was a source.
I thought you were really cool, and I read your book, and that's how we met. I read his book, Choose Yourself.
Right, and so even then, I'll put it into the model. Like with Choose Yourself, I freely gave out my ideas for how I was trying to improve myself after I'd gone broke, after I was suicidal, after I was depressed. Here's how I got out of it. Here's how I started coming up with ways to improve myself and to get rich or whatever. And
but you were very transparent, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and then when a few months after we first met, you said, hey, you would love to give your son, now my son, John, a signed copy of my book. So I went to your house, primarily because I wanted to see if I could have sex with you, but that wasn't in the cards at all. She was very prim and proper. You were wearing, I remember you were wearing like a suit practically, and John was there, your kids were there, so I met them, but I had such a fun time talking with you. And then we would text or email back and forth, but then we didn't meet for almost a year later until our first date. But you came back. I didn't have to, like when I was younger, I didn't have to ask you out because I was the source. I had made myself in so many areas of my life the source of ideas that it was natural for people to come to me. You in particular, I was glad. I'm not always glad, but you in particular, I was very glad because I was like, oh, she's asking for, by the way, she didn't ask for dinner. She asked for a coffee. And I'm like, I lied. I said, I'm kind of busy during the day, which is actually not really a lie. It's not a lie if it's a semi-truth. I'm kind of busy during the day. I don't think I can make coffee. Let's make it a dinner. Things are more likely to happen. But I was, then we had dinner. And at that time, I had just ended a relationship. So had you. And I was thinking I'm going to be a monk forever. I described this before. And the rest I've described before in other podcasts. But the key is, it's a long way of saying, get good at things, but really most importantly, this daily practice of physical health, emotional health, practicing your idea muscle so you become the source, the magnet of all ideas, spiritual health, which is going to lead to another question, so I won't describe what I mean there in a second, but that's how you meet someone who is above your pay grade, is you become the source of ideas, and it involves making sure you're highly tuned physically, emotionally, and other ways, and that you can exercise your creativity muscle, that you're curious, that you listen, that you learn, and you become the source of ideas. And don't hold on to your ideas. So many times when I was a venture capitalist, people would pitch me, oh, James, I have this great, brilliant idea, and I want to involve you, but you have to sign a non-disclosure form, an NDA. And I'd be like, I'm not signing an NDA. And they're like, oh, but then we can't share our ideas with you. And I'm like, you really think I need to steal your stupid ideas? Never. So I never listen to anybody who needs like a non-disclosure agreement. But I always freely give ideas. Yesterday, if you listen to yesterday's IG Live, I gave ideas, 2 or 3 of which are ones I'm actually even considering as businesses right now for us. So always be free with ideas. The freer, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's like a universal truth. The more you give, the more you receive. The more you give in life, the more opportunities you have. People used to write to me when I started writing with this style, I switched from writing about stocks to writing about myself and my depression and coming out of it and this daily practice and all these weird stories that had happened to me. Usually were not very flattering to me at all. And people would write to me and say, dude, what are you doing? Are you crazy? No one's going to ever trust you again. And I ended up having 50 times as many opportunities per year after that than before that. So being the honest source of truth and honesty and ideas is the best business model you can have for yourself, and the best personal model as well. Wouldn't you say?
Yes. I mean, the thing about you is that you are different, and you are set apart from a lot of people. Some people are saying, oh, money. Listen, there's a lot of people out there with money.
Believe me, a lot of people with a lot more money than me.
And there are and those people, okay, are boring, I have to say. They're just boring people. So money, it does not cut it. It never cut it with me. You may find somebody, if it does, that person you guys work good together, because then you guys deserve each other, right? But those kind of things, what attracted to me with you is that you are a thinker, and you are an independent thinker. You're very different. You grew up in the U.S., but you have a different thought process. And I got to know you. I got to know you through your book, and that's the gold. That's the wealth, is you, and that's something that you need to realize, that it's you that's important. None of the other stuff. I mean, that's why you have so many people that love you, is because you offer.
A lot of people hate me too.
Well, that's, I don't know. That's their problem. But the thing is that you offer so much, and you're such an amazing person that when people get to know you, they want to be around you. You just do so much for people, and you do that for me and the kids, and that's the goal, and that's the wealth. So the people that said, oh, because of money, that's BS. I just want to put that out there right now. So. Yeah. Because you know what? The thing is that money, you can lose that money. You can lose, and
as I've proved 4 or 5 times.
The thing is
I always tell them I'm going to lose it again.
If you marry for money, that's just ridiculous, So, because that's just temporary. It's just stupid to marry for money. You got to marry for that person, for the inside, and for.
Also, when I ran a hedge fund in the 00s, and it was we had good returns, but I was really poor at raising money, but I was always hanging out with super rich people who could invest money with me. And some of you might have heard this story. One time I was invited to visit this one super big hedge fund, tens of billions of dollars. And my friend told me, meet my boss. He will definitely invest money in your hedge fund. And I met his boss. The boss gave me a tour of the facility. And at the end, he sat me down. He said, okay, James, we'd love to hire you. Is there something else you'd want to do? And I'm like, well, I don't want to be hired, but I run my own fund, and I want you to put money in it, invest money in it. And he's like, oh, James, we would have hired you, but I can't invest money with you. I don't know what you do with the money. And he points to himself, and he said, the last thing we need here at Bernard Madoff Securities, LLC, is to have my name on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So, this was a person who had a lot of money, and now he's rotting in jail for the rest of his life. His children are dead. His wife is estranged from him. It didn't work out. So
why would you want to marry someone like that? I mean, that's just a disgusting person that's hollow, and it's yuck.
Actually, he was a very nice guy.
So, but not really.
But it was certainly mean deep down. Right. But, I want to answer, Calvin Wayman asked a question. How much of my idea lists are solution oriented? So for instance, an idea list might be 10 businesses I could start to make more money, or 10 ideas for books I could write. Those are solutions. But often I'll make idea lists. Most of my idea lists are not solution oriented at all. Or for instance, last night I made a list of 10 features I would like to see in a certain video product. And so that's solution oriented. But I might write something like, I guess a lot of things are solution oriented. So if I write, here's a book idea, here's 10 chapter titles for the book. That's solution oriented. But sometimes I'll just write 10 things I like about Robin, or 10 ways, I don't know. What's
make Robin happy.
Yeah, 10 ways. But that's solution oriented. It might be, I can do, 10 ways I'm finding the world to be hypocritical now. That's not solution oriented. That's more like information oriented. Or 10 examples of systemic racism. That's not solution oriented, that's information oriented. But then the next day I might have 10 reforms for systemic racism, which is solution oriented. So you need information before you can have solutions.
Right.
So before I can come up with product features for a product, I need to know what are the 10 features I like in this product? What are the 10 features I don't like in this product? And then having the information, I can start coming up with solution oriented. So solutions, it's not always solution oriented. In fact, I would say it's about 50-50, my idea list.
I mean, and there's so many problems out there. There are not a lot of people out there with solutions. Like if you have a problem, at least, tell the problem and then come up with the solution. I mean, there's so many problems out there. So if more people could talk about solutions than problems, that would make a much better world right now.
Yeah, like we went to a protest last week in New York City, and we went to a protest last week in New York City, and we get it. We understand. It was a peaceful protest. It was in Union Square, and everybody was shouting and chanting and handing out water, and there was white people, black people, all sorts of people, and we would ask people, "Hey, what do you think?" And everybody was very nice. Everybody gave a lot of information. I learned things, but then we would ask them, "Oh yeah, that's a really important issue you bring up." And they would kind of shrug their shoulders like, "Yeah, we just read about it yesterday." So what that suggests to me is that there was this anger and there was this distrust of the system that probably is correct, but they didn't really have solutions. They wanted to come to the party with a solution, but they didn't really, It's almost like they didn't have an outfit for the party, but they wanted to go to the party. So they researched enough to have one solution that they could bring, which is fair. By the way, I think it's okay to express anger or not anger, but express anger is another way. Anger you could think of as fear clothed. And so people are afraid. So when they think that there is racism, if you're black, you're afraid that you're going to get hurt and you don't understand why. You're going to get economically hurt or you're going to get physically hurt and you don't understand why. No, if someone is being beaten up because of who they are, they might not have a solution right away, or they might not even know why they're getting beaten up, but they're still afraid. And if someone's, let's say not, in this particular case, African American, they might be afraid that, hey, I thought the U.S. was a society where everybody was free and equal. I'm afraid society is not what I was taught, or I'm afraid there could be enough unrest and I'm not helping the situation, that maybe I'm the problem. And so it's reasonable to feel fear and not have solutions, and then use that fear to guide yourself to solutions. Fear isn't always bad. Fear you can argue it becomes negative when it turns into anger. So when somebody says to me, I can understand why there's looting, I don't agree with that, because a lot of the looting ended up in more deaths than we can even count right now, and more economic lives being destroyed. So, but I can still see why somebody would think that, because they're afraid and they don't know because they don't have the information, they don't have the correct outlet for that fear. And so what were you saying?
Well, no, I was going to say that all comes down to, though.
I'm way smaller now because I'm not sitting on it.
When growing up, they were not taught a way to be introspective. It's like a lot of people know they're angry, but they don't know why, really. Or like you just have to stop and really think about this. Why am I angry? What can change the way I feel? Right?
Yeah.
And then, but coping mechanisms, people don't know really how to cope when they do have that anger. So they don't know how to channel it into a better, more positive way. So all of this comes from bad parenting, number one, or the lack of parenting. So when you teach your kids when they're young, right, how to do all these things and how, what their coping mechanisms are, because it's really important to have those. That's my.
Yeah, no, I agree. So speaking of which, by the way, Victoria makes. So Calvin, you say fear is bad, but I do think fear is a natural response. Fear is something that helped us survive. 60,000 years ago. If you see a wolf in the distance, you would get afraid for very valid reasons. And then your fight or flight or freeze instinct would take over. But let's say it was mostly fight or flight. But now people are looking at a computer screen all day and they're feeling that same fear and they're getting that fight or flight. But the brain hasn't evolved from 60,000 years ago. So now instead of seeing a wolf and running, we're just looking at the screen and we're sitting still with that fight or flight. And that's extremely unhealthy. And so fear is not necessarily bad. It's just again, always remember, anger is fear clothed. So always be self-aware enough to say, hey, I'm feeling fear. Robin doesn't like me. I'm going to take a step back, and rather than being, well, she's wrong, just think about it. Yeah. Maybe she's wrong. Maybe she's right. Maybe what can we do together to solve it? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I'm irrational. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Like, we're always very defensive, and we want to convince someone that they're wrong. But I don't know. Fear is a useful thing to recognize is inside of you, but anger or the clothing of fear is never healthy. Because have you ever made a great decision when you were angry? Like, let's say I was angry and I was driving. Probably you wouldn't want to be driving on the road with me. But if I was like feeling in a good mood and being aware of what was going on around me, you say, okay, James is feeling safe. You usually don't trust people who are angry because they make irrational decisions. Yeah. But it's an interesting thing. I was looking at another daughter's social media post the other day, and she brought up a very good point in her social media: end forced prison labor. And so that was her own response to George Floyd and the racism. And she lives a little bit further away from New York City, so there aren't really protests. And so, that's an interesting thing too. Is prison labor racist? What's going on there? And if you look at the systemic roots of prison labor, it's in the 13th Amendment of the Constitution. It says you need to free all citizens except, I'm going to get the language wrong, except if they've been convicted of a crime. And then you are allowed to force them to do labor like a slave. So slavery does still exist in the system according to the 13th Amendment, the exact amendment that freed the slaves. It's just if you've been convicted of a crime and put in prison, you are required to do, you're like a slave. You're required to do what they tell you. And unfortunately, and there's lots of discussion about this, the reasons for this, whether it's systemic or not. But unfortunately, per capita, there is more African Americans or other minorities than non-minorities in the prison system. So you can argue slavery still exists among the exact people the 13th Amendment tried to free, and it's because of the 13th Amendment. So my daughter had made a good point, but it's also useful to understand the information. What's the history of this? So I wrote her a letter. Here's the 13th Amendment, which you're actually indirectly referring to. Here's what Martin Luther King says about it. Here's other options for prison reform. Here's other ways to look at this, to have a full holistic way of looking at something. So the key is, and I see this a lot right now on Twitter. I'm going to get to entrepreneurship in a second. I see this a lot on Twitter now, even in response to things that you post, Robin, or I post. People get angry. So if I say, in the states that have been opened, there's less, it seems like the coronavirus hasn't surged. And people will respond, wait a second, the cases have surged. You're totally full of shit. Like, people say that to me, like they get angry right away. And I'm like, okay, but there's also more testing. So if there's triple the testing and there's only double the number of cases, that means, the coronavirus seems to be going away from that area. You should look at daily new deaths or daily new hospitalizations, and then you could see a surge. But even it's lagging indicators. There's other reasons why there might be daily new deaths or daily new hospitalizations. It's hard to kind of double check this, but I have to realize too, this is just opinion. I can get as much data as I want to convince myself, but there's always going to be uncertainty, and so I have to say, well, why is this person so aggressively and angrily trying to prove me wrong on a tweet? Like, a tweet is so meaningless. Like, so I have to say, well, maybe it's important for me and for all of us to take a step back and say, well, maybe they're afraid that they're going to get this virus if they go, or maybe they're jealous that they're in a state that's still locked down, so they want to justify why they're in a state that's still locked down. Or maybe they want one political party versus another, and maybe for whatever reason, healthcare issues have become political, which is so silly, but there it is. Maybe they're afraid that if there isn't a second surge in states that are open, maybe they're afraid one person will get elected president as opposed to another, which is fine. Then I have to examine, well, why are they afraid? People say so-and-so has Alzheimer's, or people say so-and-so is a Hitler, or people say so-and-so is ruining the economy or will ruin the economy. And why do they say that? Well, I don't know. I don't know what their history is or what their background is. So people have reasons within reasons within reasons, and you can't just figure it out from one tweet. You kind of have to know them and ask a question. You say, well, why do you feel that way? Okay, well then why do you feel that way? It's going to take you a good 5, 6, 7 questions before you really start to even touch the surface of why someone might have a certain opinion, whether it's their background, whether it's their friends, whether it's their professors or bosses, or how they grew up. You don't really know. So it's sort of pointless to get angry and argue with people on Twitter. Okay, this person disagrees with me. I think they're wrong, but maybe I'm wrong. So I'm happy to be wrong, and I have to acknowledge that too. By the way, Victoria, the comedian, said something very interesting, which is that another way to get a hot wife is to be funny and to keep them laughing. And who has made you laugh more than any other person you've known?
You.
There you go. There you go.
And that's true. You know, being funny and have a great personality, but that's definitely not everything.
She says it's not everything. I will say it's close to everything. So
you gotta be a good person. You've got to be a lot of things.
It's true, but keeping them laughing.
Because there are a lot of funny people out there that are jerks.
Hey! Nobody is funnier than me.
There's a combination.
Nobody.
And you're the combination.
Victoria will attest. She's seen me perform. She's very funny too, but she's seen me perform, and
yeah, but that's not it. Because I don't want you thinking that I just like you because you're funny and you're a comedian too. So I don't want you to hand over that thinking if you're not going to do comedy anymore, I'm not going to like you, or if you're not funny anymore, I'm not, because that's not it.
She's trying to make me feel good. She's protecting me. If I don't perform comedy as much, she's telling me that's okay. She'll still love me, because now if we go back and forth between Florida and New York, I might not perform as much. And by the way, the way to practice being funny the best way to practice it is to do stand-up comedy.
So there's no comedy club here, so you can maybe talk to somebody and get a group of comedians coming here every month. Oh,
it's going to happen. Key Biscayne Comedy Festival, it's going to happen.
People love to laugh.
People do. Mm-hmm. So, all right, I'm going to answer some questions. I wanted to answer this one question from yesterday. I forget the question, but what's the secret on time and energy management? So Camellia Yang asked this, what's the secret on time and energy management? Very important question. I realized I didn't get to the 4 things I want to talk about with entrepreneurship, but we'll get to it. Time and energy management is really important to be an entrepreneur. So for instance, I used to go on CNBC a lot, and you go on CNBC and they would say, James, what do you think about what Warren Buffett said? And I would say, Warren Buffett is an idiot. And they would say, well, why do you think he's an idiot? And I'm like, X, Y, and Z. That was James Altucher, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. In order to go on CNBC for those 30 seconds, I would have to prepare for 3 or 4 hours. I would have to drive an hour to CNBC's studios in New Jersey, and then wait for a half hour, then go on for 60 seconds, maybe a minute or two, or 2 or 3 minutes, and then drive for an hour home. So it'd be like a 5-hour adventure. So you kind of have to say, what things are really moving the needle for me? Like, okay, 10,000 people might watch CNBC at a certain hour, maybe 20,000, and half of them are going to disagree with me already. Half of them are not going to give a shit. Maybe a few people will like what I say, and they'll say, well, who is that guy? That was interesting. But it never really seemed to move the needle for me, but I was doing it like 3 times a week. So that was 15 hours a week. I was wasting time, wasting my life. And so there was, I remember, you know, in CNBC, the more correct I was, the less likely I was to be invited back. Because, for instance, in 2009, I would say, load up everybody because the economy is going to surge from here. And they just laughed me off the set, and it took them another year to invite me back, even though the economy surged from there. So I realized this was not helping me at all. What helped me was writing every day, was taking care of myself every day, was being around the people I loved every day. And if I wanted to start a new business, being on CNBC did nothing. Sometimes speaking at conferences did something. But really, like if I wrote an article that 1.5 million people read on my blog or LinkedIn, that was helping me. Or the 75 million people who have downloaded and listened to my podcast, that helps me. So you have to start to measure what is helping you and even assign points to it. So maybe going on CNBC was like a 0.5 point, but writing a new article and researching something and writing about it, maybe that's 5 points. Maybe doing a podcast is 7 points. And, you know, start to measure. I realize also, like this past 3 months, I canceled 7 plane trips. I was supposed to do comedy in 4 or 5 of those times, and then 2 other times were business meetings. Well, I didn't do any of them. So when you don't travel, you save hundreds of hours. And instead of traveling, I wrote an entire 64,000 word book, which is coming out next March. I wrote that entire book during this period. So it was because I didn't travel. So it's really a matter of saying, today, what is the one thing that is most important to me? Okay, I've got to work on my book. Everything else I can say no to. No, I once asked, there's a great rapper called Mac Lethal. If you don't know who he is, he's amazing. He is so fast. Just Google him on YouTube, Mac Lethal. And I was once talking to him and I said, do you ever feel bad when you make a rap and you work really hard at it and it only got like a few thousand views on YouTube, where meanwhile your other raps get like millions of views? And he's like, no, because people never remember when you were not so good. They only remember the good ones because that's the one that the most people looked at and re-looked at and re-looked at and so on. They forget completely the bad stuff. That's why it's important I write every day. I don't necessarily publish every day, but I write every day because I know even when I have something that's bad, better to publish than not publish because people will forget the bad stuff anyway. They'll only remember the 2 or 3 really great things you do for you, or hopefully more, but if it's only 2 or 3, they'll still remember them. Like Kevin Kelly is one of my favorite bloggers, and he's maybe written 3 blog posts in the past 10 years, and yet I can say he's one of my favorite bloggers because those are the 3 blog posts. Not only do I remember them, but they've changed my life. So now maybe it took him thousands of blog posts to create those 3 blogs. Like, don't just wait until inspiration hits. That's the point of doing 10 ideas a day. But don't worry about trying to do everything every day. You can't. Just focus on doing the one thing that you feel the strongest about every day, and then improve yourself the rest of the time. Read. You know, don't go on the homepage of Twitter or the homepage of Facebook. And I admit I'm more guilty of that lately than I ever have been in the past. Don't read the news. Okay, bullshit headline of the day. Bullshit headline of the day. The New York Times. I'm switching from CNN. For once. Oh, I just saw another bullshit headline of the day, but whatever. Now you would think this would be in the opinion. Oh, there's so many bullshit headlines. I have a hard time remembering what I picked. But all right, I'll take the one I just saw. Oh, no. I don't know. Okay, here's a bullshit headline of the day. Economics, dominated by white men, is roiled by Black Lives Matter. I don't know why I thought that was the bullshit headline of the day. Just the idea that economics is dominated by anybody. Like, economics is dominated by all 300 million people who live in the country. There's no one up above. If you're not living in the old Soviet Union, there is no one who's sitting up above and saying, well, the economy is going to be good now, or the economy is going to be bad now. And then the economy is good afterwards. People at the top do the best they can 50% of the time they're right, 50% of the time they're wrong, even the smartest people on the planet. And, the economy is just about how things evolve, not in a national level, but local by local. So one of the important things about entrepreneurship right now is to remember the word local. Like if you have a local laundromat and you're worried business is not going to come back like it was, here's the thing. Locally, you need to advertise. People care about local and safety. So you need to be able to express to your local community, hey, we've disinfected all the surfaces. Hey, we're wearing masks all the time. Hey, we'll deliver to you so you don't have to touch any of the machines. But hey, the machines are the latest and greatest and they clean and they have antiviral stuff. So even if you're a laundromat trying to advertise, you have to think locally. Even if you're a delivery service, even if you're if you're Walmart, you still have to think locally. You still have to say, hey, here's what our local here's what we've done for the local community during this lockdown. Here's what our local employees, here's their stories to tell. So local is such an important word right now for any business. It's never been important before. I've never watched local news in my entire life until this pandemic. I barely even knew who the mayor of New York City was until this pandemic because we had to watch local and we had to feel safe. We were concerned about safety. So I'll talk more about that, about business models around that tomorrow. But it's not like the economy is being roiled by anything one way or the other. But there was another BS headline of the day, which is that Jimmy Fallon is sorry. You got to be kidding me. Jimmy Fallon, apologized for. Jimmy Fallon apologized because in 2000 he was in a Saturday Night Live sketch wearing blackface because he was imitating Chris Rock. Well, it's not like blackface was ever appropriate. Like Ted Danson, I think it was 1992, he was wearing blackface and he got publicly, humiliated about that. Correctly, it was a stupid thing. But Jimmy Fallon was part of a team. Like, there's a lot of people who work on Saturday Night Live. There are a lot of writers. There's Lorne Michaels. Chris Rock was there. So if Chris Rock and Jimmy Fallon are best friends, it's not like Chris Rock was saying, yo, Jimmy, that was a little bit over the edge. Like Jimmy Fallon, why is he being... There are dead people from the looting. Why are we singling out Jimmy Fallon for something he did 20 years ago that his best friend Chris Rock had no problem with? And whatever, he even apologized, Jimmy Fallon, and there's still articles about it. Like, can we move past Jimmy Fallon? He's not the most important person in the world here, and this was something that happened 20 years ago. We need to focus on what's happening now. I'm not saying it was a good thing that he did or a bad thing. It was part of a Saturday Night Live sketch. Like, forget it. Doesn't even merit a headline. So, now, this is why I love Cosmopolitan. So the great headline of the day, the truthful headline of the day, Cosmopolitan has become the main source of news. Here's the front, if you go to cosmopolitan.com right now, here's the front article. Defunding the police isn't punishment. It will actually make us safer. So I don't even know if that's right or wrong, but at least this is the main issue confronting the United States right now. This is what Congress is talking about. This is what the protesters are talking about. This is what Trump and Biden are talking about. Cosmopolitan is the only news source I see a headline. Here's 6 things that defunding the police does. Oh, okay, I want to know that. And then they list the things that we should care about with defunding the police, like end enforcement of minor offenses. Like I remember one time I got a ticket for doing a K-turn on the street. Really? Was that really harming the community? Like, it's just a way for the community to make money. Defund that stuff. End the presence of police in schools and instead develop mobile crisis services, crisis hotlines, and so on. Ban pretextual stops that act as common, blah, blah, blah. Implement common, like for instance, the one area where the police really help save lives is with domestic violence. I haven't heard a single person talk about that. Like domestic violence and I have never, other than TV shows, I have never seen a policeman solve a burglary in progress. Like, Adam 14, we got to get to, there's a burglary in progress. I'm seeing the Sinestro break into a house. That's never happened. they're usually called afterwards and they don't solve the crime, which is why most people don't even like talking to the police or calling the police, because they don't solve a crime. So the police are not good for solving crimes, or for stopping crimes, I should say. The only crimes that I've seen police with my own eyes stop is domestic violence and child abuse. So keep those police around. Get rid of the police that are just there to raise money for the municipality. And, you know, in terms of solving crimes, yeah, like maybe they solve burglaries, but I've actually reported a couple different burglaries in the past 50 years. I've never seen the police actually get me anything back. So they're not really that good. They're just there to raise money for the community by ticketing people and fining people as much as possible. Like, everybody's afraid when the police turns on their headlights if they do a K-turn in an empty street. Like, that's just stupid. So, and then, anyway, but Cosmopolitan magazine points this out. The New York Times and CNN does not point this out. So, again, bullshit headline, good headline of the day.
I have a question. What is a K-turn?
A K-turn is when you go, you back up, you're trying to make a U-turn, but it's like a one-lane street.
And you're backing up into the traffic?
No, there's no traffic. It's a two-lane street.
Yeah.
So, but there's no actual U-turn.
Right.
Like a U-turn is when you could actually go around the barricade and U.
Right.
But a K-turn is like you have to back up and go towards where you park, and then you move this way, and then you back up this way, and then you go back.
Street.
Yeah. So that's a common, you learn that in driving school. So you're tested on that in the driving tests. As I know, because I almost took the driving test again when I was thinking about getting. So, and K-turn is, people do it in every day, in every city, all across the country. It's totally safe.
I just didn't know you could do that on the street. Like on a street. I've never.
Unless there's a sign that says no K-turns, sometimes you could do it in an intersection, but there's no barricade. It's the same as a U-turn, but is less room. So you have to do a K-turn instead of a U-turn.
Oh, I see.
So, and usually it's in an intersection, so you have a little more room to back up, but it's not quite a U-turn. A U-turn happens when there's like a barricade and the lanes are bigger.
Okay.
So on a main street in everyday town, USA, you have to do a K-turn instead of a U-turn. It's the same principle.
Okay.
Anyway, I should teach her how to drive because
I've never seen a K-turn sign.
Well, no, there's not. They don't say you can do K-turns. There are signs that say you can't do K-turns, and that's when you'll get a fine because those signs are usually hidden behind some tree, and it's a trap. So that's how they may. But some people agree with you. Real talk. Tina has never heard of a K-turn either. And some, if anything,
I don't know. I was just wondering if it was a northern thing or something.
I don't know.
We didn't have it in the West Coast.
You probably were taught it in your driver's ed. They have to teach it.
A long time ago.
So. Look on YouTube for K-turn. Anyway, there's 1 minute, 37 seconds remaining. So tomorrow, as usual on Fridays, I'll have my $10 million business idea of the week. Hopefully, I'll be able to get to the words that I think are important to start up new businesses. And there's still more questions to answer. But I will get to the $10 million. Oh, it's called a 3-point turn sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And so, you never call my name. Oh, so it's Tala 007, Tala 007, who said she had never heard of it either. And I'll store this on IGTV. I'll store this on YouTube. It'll also be available in a podcast in a couple of days, but on YouTube today and IGTV in a few minutes. And tomorrow, $10 million business idea of the week. And I'll try to come up with I had thoughts on another 30-day book challenge, particularly now that I'm done with my latest book, hopefully the last draft. So, see you guys tomorrow, 2 p.m.
Yes, 2 p.m.
Thank you, Robin, for joining
James.
me and for putting up with me. And goodbye, everybody.
It's funny.